Well met, weary traveler. Come in and sit by the fire for a moment. Take up your flagon of ale or mead and lend your ear. Let us regale you with the tales of bygone adventure and the wisdom of ages. Or, just listen in while three dudes named Jeff, Chad, and Jeremy talk about role-playing games.
I'd have ruined that.
I mean, other than the fact that I'm seeing Black Panther tonight. Other than that, I got nothing else. Right now. Black Panther should be good. Should be cool.
I hope so.
I'm excited. But as far as cool character development stuff, man, I'm down for some character development if you guys want to play with that. Let's do it.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Dang. Chad's just ready to go. Just
straight
in.
No kissing.
No toying around. Enough of this banter stuff. I want to get into
this.
Look,
banter way too much.
These look like mofos. I got a movie that I got to get to, so TikTok.
Right? I'm on a time schedule. You guys are...
Time is of the essence.
No, man, I'm down for however you guys want to run this and however you want to do this.
Let's just jump in. Let's do the intro.
Yeah, let's do it.
Drums. Cool.
This is gonna be us.
Jeff, you were on mic, man.
Just making that's band sound effects with our mat,
That's the Dudes of Yore. 2 drums and a mic.
Drums and a mic.
And I covered drums. Jeff, what happened?
What happened? We were hoping you'd come in with the hi hats and
we were
the,
laying down
the
some
brass
sick drum
section,
beats, man.
And you just
at least
left us lying on the cutting room floor.
At least maybe a little beatboxing.
Sometimes, hey. Sometimes the most effective music that you can contribute is silence.
That's true.
That's edgy.
That is,
damn.
Man, you got super deep with us right now, man. Damn.
This cardboard that I have laying on my dining room table right now, because I'm in my house, has a little sign here that says "No cutting." No cutting. And that was deep, man. That was edgy.
That cut me deep. It did.
It was so edgy that it might have cut this box, and that would be dangerous because it says right on the box.
You guys are coming in here trying to critique my musical creative contributions here, and I just don't really feel like that's appropriate.
That's true.
Very well.
My contributions, in whatever manner that I make them, are beautiful and special, and nobody will tell me.
Jeff,
I'll tell you what.
You're always the bard, buddy. You're always going to be my bard.
I'll tell you what, man. I'm going to apologize for stepping over the line because that's the kind of person I am. I was raised in a household where I was taught to be polite, considerate. I developed character.
Oh.
Did you guys catch that segue?
Developed character? Dang!
Did you
guys?
Did you guys catch that? It went by fast.
In traditional Dudes of Yore fashion, we set up an awesome segue and immediately ruin it by pointing it out and talking about it for a minute.
Segue crashes are more popular than segues. Our studies have shown that.
Fine.
Yeah, I've done the market research. My analytics are in. The science has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Crashing segues gets
it apparently
gets
does
the money, and that's what we're here for.
We love them crit 1s just as much as we love them crit 20s. You know it. Deep down, you know it.
I live for those critical failures.
The dice tell the best story. Period.
Yeah. All right. Well, now that we've thoroughly just crashed that segue and ground it into dust, hello everybody. Welcome to the Dudes of Yore, episode 4. I think we're only on episode 4, and I've already lost track, so that's a good sign. 4. I'm calling it now, and when I'm wrong, it's gonna look hilarious.
It's all right. No, you're on 4.
I am.
Yeah, we had the. We became 3 at 3, so this is 4. We're good to go.
So of course I'm Jeff, as usual from Encounterbalance, joined by here as well by my beautiful friends Jeremy and Chad.
Yeah, and I
How
am
you guys doing?
Jeremy from the Erasmus expeditions, and I'm also 1/3 of this podcast.
Yep, and my name is Chad Knick, over at Chad Knick on YouTube. It's Knick, but hey, if you go and search Chad Knick, Nick, I don't know what that person has. They may be cooler than me, just saying.
Oh man, you got that special K.
I got that special K.
You're good.
All that fiber in my diet, man. That's what I need.
Oh my god.
No.
Yeah, I hear.
Not even.
Yeah. So today we are going to be talking about character building and character development, ways that you can build a character, and ways that you can kind of discover that character further and get into them for your games. We're going to be focusing specifically on non-mechanical aspects, so things like personality and mannerism, voice, backstory, all that kind of good stuff, the extra stuff that can kind of help bring a little bit of life to a mechanical character. There's nothing against mechanical characters. We're all hugely, at least I know me and Jeremy are, really into the mechanic side of things, but that is a discussion for another time.
Yeah, I agree. There's enough material to talk about without having to delve into the mechanic side, which there is also a lot of material about. So I think separating them is the best call, honestly. So,
yeah, I agree.
One of the things
So I think
No,
Go
please.
ahead.
Take it away.
After you.
Oh, man.
I'm just going to sit here and watch the two of you just do this. I'll just sit and wait.
Chad, how's your popcorn, buddy?
Good, man.
Enjoying
Good.
yourself
You guys are I'm having a blast.
This is the new Dudes of Yore formula. Is just me and Jeremy telling the other person to speak for
Exactly.
an hour and we cut. It's great listening. The audience is gonna
Chad
love
just
it.
busts down the wall like the Kool-Aid man. He's like, boom! He's like, yeah, let's do this. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay.
I don't mess
for it,
around,
man.
dude. I don't mess around.
No,
this is why
yeah,
you guys
that's-
this is why we came together. So I can keep
Exactly.
everybody on track. No.
It was fate,
no,
destiny.
I don't know. I don't know how you want to do this, Jeff, in terms of structure, but
Structure, he says.
Structure in one of our. Have you listened to this
yeah,
show?
no, there
how
is
have
no
you not-
structure. What am I talking about? Okay, well, I'm just gonna start rambling then, and then you guys can just tell me to stop whenever you
Chaotic
want
neutral here.
Yeah. So I think a good kind of starting point is something that we kind of talked about a little bit before the show that I think is interesting about this topic is that it's a kind of the approach to it is kind of very personal.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that I make my characters and the way that I develop them is going to be very different from the way that maybe Jeremy or Chad might
Yep.
do the same thing. So I think kind of a good starting point might just be to kind of go through our kind of individual processes, and then we can kind of talk about that for
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's
So-
fine.
whichever one of Chad, since you're so gung ho, why don't you go first?
Absolutely,
How do you-
I will 100% take
how do you-
that marker and run with it. Yeah.
We're gonna have
so
to get it back at some point.
how do I go about building the minutia of my character?
Yeah, so you've decided, that you want to play this certain class in this certain race, and you want to get all the rest of it figured out. Who this person actually is, how they act, where they're from, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
What's your kind of zero to finish process on that?
So my thing is when I get involved in a game, obviously, if it's an interest post or something, somebody has piqued my interest enough for me to be like, oh, I'm really invested in this game. I want to do this. I do a little research on the game itself. So if it's a setting that I'm not familiar with or whatever, I usually go to the DM and say, hey, what's this setting about? What is this setting? How is this game gonna, what's this game gonna be about? Just so I have kind of an idea of where to start my character. Once I have,
place to start.
yeah. Once I have that little bit of background, I then go, well, okay, what races are available to me in this setting, right? Because sometimes you'll get a setting that I'm like, I want to play a dragonborn or I want to play a tiefling, and they're like, those aren't in this setting. You can't do that, Chad. You can't be a flippin' snowflake in the middle of a desert. You can't do that. I'm like, but that's my life, though.
Yeah. It's my line, man.
Yeah, that's my whole life, though, man. Yeah, it's a thing where the next step after that is once I've chosen my class, once I've chosen my race, and once I have an idea of the game, I go into the voice, obviously. Like, that's my first big thing, is what does this person's voice sound like? Because I think a lot of times for me, it's if I can get into how their tones and like moods that they would have throughout a thing, you know, or their opinions and their ideals, how they would react to certain situations, that sets up how I act in a game. So the voice is obviously my next biggest thing, and then personality traits, like little quirks that I can throw in that are very unique to that particular character, are a big thing for me. So, and a lot of times,
yeah. If you don't mind me, just
no,
pushing on
that's
a
fine.
little bit, can you give like an example of what that kind of quirk
absolutely.
might be? Like what kind of, like when you say quirk, what does that mean to you?
Let's see. How do I go and explain this? Yeah, let's just use some examples that I currently have out there in the ether of the YouTubes. Taxes and Rank Shank. They're both very like lizardish creatures, but both of them, if you took both of them apart, they have individual stylistic things that I do that separate them apart from one another. So Taxes is this big, broad dragonborn, and he has like a very deep and very gritty tone to his voice. So when I drop down to that angry, like guttural growl bass, it's because I want that sort of, I've been through shit and I've seen a lot and I'm tired of it. I wanted that sort of like Lethal Weapon Murdoch, I'm too old for this shit kind of thing for Taxes. And it came across at the end of the day, and I was really happy about it. Actually, he got inspired. He got inspired by Rooster Cogburn from True Grit. Like, no joke. That was my first thing that I brought out when they asked me, what is his voice going to be like? And then,
so you make a connection. You make a connection auditorially with a character from something else.
Oh, absolutely.
And then,
100%.
And then use that as a connection to personality quirks of that character and kind of transfer them over. That's awesome.
I do like 100% of my character quirks and 100% of my personality quirks come from movies. So if I think like, you know, man, this setting would be really cool to have this, I might go watch like 5 or 6 different Bruce Willis movies just to say like, I want my John McClane, or I want those kind of aspects in this character. I'm gonna go watch a bunch of those. If I want to Judge Dredd, I'm gonna go watch Judge Dredd and like have that lawful neutral ideal in my head.
That's so funny. Okay, go ahead, please.
Oh no, like I think, I mean, that's kind of where I go from there. And then all the other little stuff, the other quirks that I have is like, you know, with Rank Shank, it was he's a smaller character, and I wanted him to really just be like all about survival. And so what I did was I combined Stitch and Gollum and was like, here, like, let's see if those two would make a voice. And then I watched Jurassic Park a bunch and like learned how to do raptor sounds for the background noises, right? Like the those kinds of things. Those little quirks, like in between his actual auditory vocals, are enough to make him a different character than Taxes, because I wanted him to be more primal in Cryfoth than how Taxes is in Lore Keepers.
Nice.
Yeah, like, this is already really interesting to me, because like it seems like you very much tie in like your understanding of the person to like how they talk and like the way that they speak.
Oh yeah.
which is interesting because that's like totally. I mean, obviously it makes sense given kind of your interest and what you do, like with voice acting in general. Because that's like totally not an entry point to my character for me. So it's interesting to like think about like how I would even go about doing that if I were to try to do it that way.
Well,
which is already interesting.
And what's really funny is like I use a kind of similar method. I go to watch movies and listen to music and things that deal with a particular genre or something, but it's still very, very different. It's a different approach, even though I go and do the same activity that Chad's talking about.
Yeah, man. Like
Cool.
I would totally be interested in like hearing your perspective and seeing how that works. Because I mean, the only other things that I can think of that like I do that are the things that I like to help build my character are, once I've got those little things down, I like to pinpoint little lore pockets, little things that like might be usable in a game. So even if it's like a one shot, I might ask the DM, hey, what's in this setting that I could take away from like being a paladin or being a cleric, or certain things that will add to those quirks that I can then play off of, like if a DM came to me and said, well, we're playing in Harbinger and you're playing as a mechanist, and so maybe you want to have X, Y, and Z be the type of servos you have, the spheroids you have. And I'd be like, yeah, cool. And then I'd make them integrally a part of me for some reason, and I'd have them be thematically shaped to allow me that kind of comfort and knowledge that, oh, hey, it'll be really easy for me to like stylize these spells or whatever, but also something that like thematically ties my character to the setting and the game that the DM is playing.
Yeah, for sure. That's just where I think a lot of people honestly make a mistake in a lot of the process of developing a character. And going into developing a character the way that at least the three of us discuss it, I'm sure, this evening, it's a deep dive for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who aren't comfortable going this far with developing a character, and that's like, to me, that's perfectly fine. Like, you go as comfortable as you are.
Oh yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to like go fully down the rabbit hole of the character building steps.
Well, what I think will be interesting is when we end up kind of coming around to me at least, is like, I don't do a lot of upfront stuff for any of my characters. Like, I'm very kind of light prep. Prep's not the total correct word for it, but I think it gets enough across.
Well, what do you do, Jeff?
Yeah, I can just go ahead and kind of get into my process a little bit. So it's, I think, surprisingly basic. I basically, once I decide on all the mechanics first for my character, basically almost always, like, it's just the way that my brain kind of does it. But once I have all that settled, I come up with basically 3 bullet points about this character, something that they want, a tie to the world, culturally, and then kind of some people that they might be aware of or know.
Okay.
And kind of that's, so my kind of starting point is a little bit more like grounded in like the setting that I'm in. So like, how is this person going to fit into this world? Do they fulfill a certain role? Like, if they're like a warrior. So like, kind of just to use an example, in the same way that you kind of did with taxes. So like, my character Phelan for Lloyd's Saga game, basically my going into it point was more or less just, I know he's a warrior for the Carl that we serve. He's not from these lands, but he's lived here a long time. He has a wife and kid in the city. And that was like, honestly, basically it. Like, the majority of the way that I do my characters, I almost never decide on personality before the game starts.
I
Like,
could
it's
not
just-
do that. Like that, I feel like that's like throwing me out into a game completely naked, right? Like that seems so foreign to me. But I love it.
I actually have a specific point where I realize that this is like the case for me, because before I would try to come up with like, okay, how's this person gonna act? You know, like the specifics. What's their personality? What's gonna be like? You know, big points like that. And then I remember I got into a game where I had decided all of that information, and like the second the game started, I realized that none of it felt right. Like all the time that I had put into making all of it, suddenly the way that it felt natural to play the character was not even close to all the pre-work that I had done for that character. So suddenly it's like I had wasted like all this time, like hours thinking about, you know, all these specifics and all these personality aspects and all these quirks. And then like I sat at the table and was like, none of that feels right. Like this doesn't feel like the kind of game where that character would fit into what's happening. So I basically just changed all of it on the fly and just kind of built a habit out of that, where it just kind of, I settle on features of just who's this person in the world, what's kind of a motivation driving point for them, what's a goal that they can try to pursue outside of or in addition to the normal session campaign goals. And then if it's a campaign, you know, NPC and PC connections.
Right.
And like there's other things that I do after, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, to dive deeper into the character, but I never do those steps until I've played the character for a session.
Okay.
Wow, that's cool.
So basically completely the opposite of what Chad does.
Yeah, it's a very right-brained kind of analytical way of approaching it, but to me it still makes sense. Like, and yeah, I think it's a good way, and it makes sense to you, which is perfect.
I mean, I tend to be a very kind of free-form and improv-based person in general anyways, so it's like I kind of take a lot of that into a lot of the stuff that I do. Of it just like, I'd rather just jump in, just right into it without, you know, and then just feel it out as we go, rather than like, I'm going to set everything up beforehand and know exactly how I'm going to approach it from the start. Like that kind of freewheeling, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to figure something out. Like that is like my sweet spot, I feel, in a lot of these kinds of things.
Yeah, it makes you make a snap decision.
Just the way that my brain
go with
works.
Your gut. And if you like your gut instinct, then that works out very, very well. That's awesome.
All right, so I'm interested to see then where Jeremy either falls between the spectrum of me and Chad.
I know.
Or
I feel like I'm the
completely outside
extreme
of it.
one right now.
Well, I mean, there's only been two of us so far, so one of us is the extreme, and we have no way of know. Well, you know, all of it's extreme, or none of it is, or both. It's complicated.
That's kind of the thing about art and passion in general, is you're really going to only be the only one who ever truly understands why you go as far and as hard as you do into something. And other people are not going to understand it. Some people might come close. Some people might think they understand it, but it has a different meaning to them. But you create art for yourself, and that's what we're doing. You know, a lot of us feel that way. It's performance art. And
like to me, the idea of like watching like 8 movies just to create my character is like, that's literally like a foreign concept. That's like alien to me to do that. But you know, obviously it works for Chad, and that's what's important. Is like that what you do works for you, which I think is a good aside that you kind of bring up in the middle of this process. Is like the things that we do, at least for me, like I've made dozens, if not hundreds of characters at this point. Like I've kind of found my stride in how I like to do it, and I'm guessing it's the same for Chad and Jeremy as well. If it's like, ultimately, we're giving our process because it might provide some context and some options, but ultimately, you kind of have to find your own way of sliding in and either bringing in all these different ways of doing it, or finding your own completely separate path that you can build yourself.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we talked about
there's no
that.
one way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, we talked about it in one of the other episodes about how, like, that's what you have to discover in this hobby. If you have to find what it is about the hobby that you can bring that makes a really strong connection for you. And when you find that thing, be it poetry or, music or acting or, painting or whatever, like, you've got to find that connection, and that's going to be your through line that will keep you invested and involved the best. So as long as you can keep finding ways to bring your passion into the hobby, then your hobby will be passionate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. But with that, I think very important aside, I'm glad that she brought it up. But with that kind of said, I'm curious as to the Jeremy school of character building.
Oh man, shit! If this shit is a school, then my kids are all outside under a tree somewhere with their shoes off. Like, this is.
Hey, considering my school was just like, just do whatever feels right in the moment and don't care. Like, you can't do worse than that for being a teacher.
Yeah, I guess not. Man, like, I go about it different ways with different characters. Sometimes I get really, really into a character. I get really excited about it ahead of time, and I'll spend, a week or two kind of just gnawing on it. But other times, I'll have put the character sheet together so that it's ready to play, and I ran out of time for one reason or another, and I don't really have much of an idea going into the session, or I'll have the car ride home from work before the session starts to kind of mull it over. And it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it blows up in my face, but most of the time I feel like I'm able to find the character through one method or another. But my tried and true method is also the same kind of stuff that I do when I'm world building or game designing. I call it steeping, and it's basically just I absorb media that I feel a connection to the character or the story or what have you, and I do that for days. I'll watch movies, listen to music, read comic books if I can. If I've got time, you listen to an audiobook. I look at art a lot for inspiration because I use a lot of art in my games anyways. But when I'm developing a character specifically, a lot of what I take away from their character's personality is directly from the portrait that I find to use for them. Like I said, I'm a big fan of fantasy art, and pretty early on with the concept for a character, I go to find a portrait of them. And I look at it really
So you
closely.
kind of start with the picture and kind of build off of who you think that person is in the picture?
Yes, absolutely. I study like their facial expression, like the things that they're wearing, how they're standing. Because I come from a background in acting as well, and I did a lot of stage acting. So there's a lot of physicality in stage acting. One of the big things that they teach you, or that I was taught in the school that I went to, is the best and most profound way that you can change a character from yourself is to hold yourself differently, to walk different, to slouch whenever you don't normally, or straighten up whenever you don't normally. Hold your body in an entirely different position, and that will change the way you feel, and therefore it will change your performance.
Oh yeah, dude, I totally agree with that. 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Like if you can buy into body language as well as like visual aspects of your character, it will 100% sell that character one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me too, because I build my character first, and then I find art for that character after. It sounds like you kind of completely reverse that.
Typically, I'll try to find a picture that I really like and really connect with, and then I'll be like, okay, this guy definitely looks like a warlock to me, and definitely not getting an old one vibe. I'm definitely not getting an archdemon. I could see some Fey traits in this. It's got some leaves in his armor and things like that. So yeah, he's going to be a warlock patron.
Oh, that's super cool.
With the Fey.
Yeah.
That's a lot of times how I do that.
Interesting.
But the voice that I usually choose kind of comes from the steeping that I do. I'll find somebody within that media somewhere, or a voice within that media, or something that'll kind of give me some hints to go off of. And like Chad was talking about, I draw upon movies that I've seen to kind of connect the characters to them. So my character may not sound like Alan Rickman as the Sheriff of Nottingham from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
But you're pulling
like him.
You're pulling aspects from that character because
Yes.
it's going to behave that exact way. Yeah, no, that's 100% perfect. I mean, the way that I look at it is if you can't actually perform the voice, the best thing you can do is to look at their mannerisms, at their aspects of their character, and then pull that out in the best way possible for when you're actually performing.
Yeah. There's actually an exercise that I use sometimes if I find a really hard time kind of getting into the skin of the character, if you will. And it's something that I kind of came up with very much like an acting exercise, but I came up with this whenever I was actually trying to make independent film here in Houston for a little while.
Oh, very cool.
And I was a director for one of the projects that we worked on, and I had to try to get a way to get these actors to try to connect with their characters. So we did this exercise, and I find it's really useful for RPGs as well. And I kind of start off with everybody closing their eyes, and just listen to the voice. That kind of stuff, dim the lights if you want to. And I tell them to picture a bank of fog. That's all that you can see in front of you is just this thick, thick white fog. And then suddenly you start to see a shape in the fog. And this shape is somewhat familiar, but you can't make out details. It's just a silhouette at this point. And as this silhouette continues to walk towards you, stepping out of this fog, more and more details start to become clear to you. You can see the kind of clothing they're wearing, the length and color of their hair, whether or not they have a lot of armor on, or whether they're more robes. Oh, it wasn't a robe, it was a cloak that you saw. You can see it, a huge mace hanging by their side. You start pulling out details as this figure is coming closer and closer to you.
That's super
And
cool.
then you can start seeing more and more detail until finally you can hear their voice. And they're saying something to you. And then finally they step into view fully and you can see them. That's the character you should try to be playing, in my opinion. Because that came straight from the bottom of your psyche, of your heart, of your soul. And that's what you should be playing, because that's what you really want to be playing.
Oh, dude, you're like, you're hitting me in all of my special bits, man. Damn, it's just like I closed my eyes and like followed that for a minute, man. That was dope. Oh my goodness, so good.
It's one of those silly
So
one of those silly acting exercises that if you really stop worrying about it being so silly and just try to take it serious for just a minute, it's got something to it.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me about all of that, for one, I agree that it's very, very cool. I do a lot of exercises and stuff for my characters, but I never do it until I've played them, if that makes any sense. So it sounds like you guys do all this stuff before, where it's like I play a session as the character and then use exercises like this to bring further definition and kind of push them further and figure out extra details. But like doing it before I've played the game, for some reason, like just doesn't
Dude, and that's 100% fine. I can tell you numerous games where, and it's usually in one shots that this happens, but like I've had numerous games where I'll walk into the game or I'll sit down for a game and like I have a definition of a character in my head, and then the voice that comes out or the character that comes out of my mouth is 100% different than what I had in the car. Or, like I was thinking about the idea of this character on the way here, and then as soon as I sat down 5 minutes into it, after I've heard all the other cool like character montages and intros, I'm like the last one on the docket, and they're like, Chad, introduce your character. And I'm like, like, I don't know what the hell I am anymore. You guys are so much cooler than me.
My voice usually will walk all over the first session. Like I will have a really hard time pegging down the accent most of the time, or the characterization of the voice. But yeah, I like the prep that I kind of talked about. That's all I really do if I have a lot of time. I don't pick a lot about their backstory without, like you said, talking to the
that's
DM.
actually I was just gonna kind of try to move into that, so I'm glad that you kind of brought it up. Is backstory,
king of segues.
Like how much versus how little do you guys use?
I mean, it's dependent on the game, and whether or not I feel like that character is going to be significant. You know what I mean? Like if it's in a one shot, or if it's in a like I'm only gonna play this character.
Let's just say
okay,
campaign.
Yeah. So for a campaign, for the sake
of like doing all of the process.
Absolutely. So for a campaign, though, yeah, I do want to deal with the backstory. I do want to delve in that, and so with the backstory for a campaign character, I usually do tend to go to my DM first, because obviously you want to go to them and say, hey, what's in your world? What's cool? What can I play with? Are there any factions here that my character might be affiliated with? What do they know? Things like that initially. And then you kind of move into, okay, what are the important details of their life? I don't usually do heavy-handed on that kind of stuff unless I have to. But for a campaign, it's really nice to have those things like, are your parents alive? That's a cool thing. Mm-hmm. Is your culture even alive? Are you one of the only ones? Are you a rare race thing? That's an important thing, because if you are a rare race amongst your people, that's going to be a very interesting dynamic that's going to carry around the campaign. Of how people approach you and perceive you. So those are the things that like I have to know from the get-go, from backstory perspective. And then all the other stuff sort of like fills in. Like with taxes especially, I'm starting to discover little things, and I do it with actually historically relevant things. And what I mean by that is like, okay, let's take taxes, for instance, because I'm using him as an example. For Lore Keepers, when Rob finally came to me and said, hey, look, we're doing these sessions about his history and about his stuff. I want you to help me write what the Dragonborn were about. And so I went and I did all this cool research on Native American tribes and like Tibetan monks and stuff, because he had this idea that they were like mountain dragons, and like that they like protected these ancient artifacts in the mountains. And I was like, oh, that's super cool. I want to do that. And then so I started just picking and piecing things together of just these little nuggets of history and really cool lore that I could then pull out when it came time to show that off in game. Like a ritual or maybe the way that they bury their dead or something like that. Like, those things I'll write down on a little notepad and I'll hold on to, because they may not come up in a game at all. But the fact that I have them in my back pocket is important. So I think from a character perspective, background-wise, you kind of want to have that. Are you going to run into your parents? Are your parents still alive? Do you have an enemy that you've made in a town 3 or 4 miles away? Is there something you did to a character backstory that could possibly indebt you to someone else? These things are things you want to talk to with your DM, but also like you want to hold on to in your back pocket, because then you can perform it better, because you have an emotional base to base that off of.
You need to play Dread, Chad.
Yeah?
Like,
I need to play Dread?
Dread is a really fun, very interesting game, but one of the coolest parts about it, and it's something I'm going to start incorporating in my own D&D games and things, especially campaigns, is you answer a questionnaire that has been customized for you as a player by the GM.
Oh, dang. That's cool. Yeah.
So it feeds you pointed questions for you to answer in character, and some of them have basically kind of like a hidden agenda in them. So like the DM will be able to read your answer, and they had written the question with an idea in mind based on whatever your answer is.
Like, what's your biggest fear?
Exactly.
Spiders.
And they have a plan to use your fear in the game.
Well,
it's beautiful.
And it's not even necessarily at least the one that I've done. I haven't played Dread, but I've played games where I've done like Dread style questionnaires. And it's like not even necessarily just as simple and direct as like, what's your greatest fear? It's like, what was the last time your greatest fear affected you, and what happened in that situation?
Oh yeah, that's
like very
cool,
specific.
Or stuff like.
So not only do you have to come up with a fear, but you have to come up with a memory and the specific way that it affected
that
your
would
character.
even be rough.
Or stuff like whose body was it that you stuffed into a dumpster and left?
Yeah,
it's like stuff like that. So like the DM gets to kind of shape your character a little bit so that you fit into the story.
Yeah.
Really deep.
Oh my god, that's super cool. Yep, nope, gonna have to play Dread. Like that's on my bucket list now.
For sure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for adding that to there, because like it's not like I don't already have a bunch of games going on. Like you guys got to add more to me. That's fantastic.
The downside of Dread is that you can't play it online, so you don't have to worry about us.
Oh, I'm sure I'll have you guys dragging me into it at some point. Like it'll be a thing.
At con,
like you guys will be like, "Hey, Chad, remember that game that you said you weren't going to play for a while? Like we're going to play it, like right now." Okay.
I'm calling it this year.
I mean, if that did happen, it wouldn't have been. It would have been after a while. So you would.
I'm calling it this year. I will run a Dread game at AtCon.
See, you're already putting yourself on the spotlight now. Though
let's not get too crazy into AtCon sides.
Let's get back on point.
I am curious though, something, and then we'll get to kind of Jeremy's backstory stuff and then mine. But I'm curious, Chad, specifically for you, because this is kind of a point of like difference, I think, in a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Before session 1, before you've even played, how many pages, if any, of backstory do you have? Is it half, one, more,
honestly,
less?
1 page. And I limit myself to 1 page. And it's just 1 page of notes from the first session. So,
like a full page?
Full page of notes. And it usually goes, here is the most important thing that I want for my character. Here is the most important thing that I want to emote with my character. And here is the most important thing that I want out of this campaign. Right? Like, what is my final goal? What is the big thing that I would like to see out of this campaign? And then that's something that I actually give, like I'll give, or I'll let the DM know during like a session 0. Is like, here's what I really would love to see out of this campaign, or here's what I would really like to get out of my character. Because I feel like in a campaign setting especially, like you're all there to play in a game collectively, but not only that, like you want to help the DM achieve his vision, but at the end of the day, you want your character to be memorable not only for them, but for you, you know? So, like, having those little trinkets of, I would really like to accomplish this thing in this game is important. So, for me, with Lore Keepers, it was, I really want to investigate dragon lore. I really want to investigate that. Can we do that some point in the sessions? And Rob was like, 100% yes. And originally, I don't think he had Dragonborn in mind for, like, the Lore Keeper setting. I don't even think he had that in mind for it. But because I asked to be a Dragonborn right off the get-go, he found a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's those little things, as long as you have an understanding GM that can work with you, it can really help to make a solidified, beautiful character that not only you will love and like hold dear, but like your DMs are gonna hold on to and be like, man, you know what? That was an amazing campaign. I had some amazing players, and I'm gonna remember that even when the sessions are done.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like I keep mine to 1 page.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a dense page.
Yeah, but it's a dense page. It is.
It's a big sheet.
It's just one large sheet. I get a big.
I actually cut it off of a roll of butcher paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Throw it out in crayon.
I go to.
Yeah, Chad's got one of those like wall-sized whiteboards, and he just pretends.
I go to
it's one
Michael's
page.
and pick up the foam craft board and start drawing on like one of those big 4x8 sheets of foam craft. Like, this is just one sheet, right, guys?
It's only one
sheet. That's all I need. Jesus, no.
No, man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's fantastic that you can draw that much from so little, especially.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is give and take, though. You gotta be willing to ask questions as well as have someone else be willing to ask questions of you. And like, I hope that my DMs come to me and go, what do you expect, from this game? And if they don't, it means that they have a concrete idea in mind, and it doesn't allow for that, what we're talking about, the character creationism that we're building. If you're not allowed to build your character and you're sort of like shoehorned into an idea, then it doesn't feel like the world is lived in.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Absolutely.
So, funny point of massive contrast between me and Chad yet again.
Jeff, I feel like you and I are just. I feel like you and I are like polar opposites. I'm going to be honest.
So my backstory is 2 to 3 incomplete bullet point sentences, no more ever. Like, unless the GM specifically gives me like a Dread style questionnaire or specifically prods me for like very specific information, it's like 3 bullet points that are like half sentences. And that's my backstory going into a game. And it's usually basically like their goal, like what do they want as a person, what's their like family situation like, and what's their role in the setting. Like, are they a warrior, are they a noble, whatever. Like, and that's my backstory. And
you are Starbucks bland, bro, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Well, no, so here's the thing. I'm a very much like a blank canvas type of player. So the reason that I do it this way is so that when situations come up where people ask questions about my character, like I can kind of discover the character alongside everyone else. If that makes any sense? So if somebody says like, tell me a story about your character, I basically just say whatever comes to my mind, and I'll write it down. I'll add it to my notes. Like my character notes, like 7 sessions in, are not 3 bullet points. There are a bunch of things that I've added, but like these are details that I kind of feel out in game and kind of decide like stories about my character. What do they really want? Why do they really act the way that they do?
That's very cool. I mean, I leave some of that stuff open ended on my end too, but like, I don't know. I love your style, and I'd actually really like to see if I could do that. I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
I think my personality wouldn't allow me to do that. I think I'd be like, oh shit, 3 bullet points. What the fuck? Like, what do I do? What do I do? I only have 3 things that I can put on this piece of paper and tell myself like, this is this character. I think I kind of freak out because I'm so used to having that large pool of things to pull from.
Yeah, and now that's not to say that like my method is superior and that yours is not. Like, I think that they're both equally valid ways of making a character. It's just like it comes down to a lot to personal style.
Absolutely.
And like the way that you like to go through your character.
Yeah, it's about how much you feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like, because ultimately what you need to be is comfortable. That's the way that you're going to enjoy yourself the most, is if you're comfortable. And we all know nerves are a hell of a thing to have to deal with
Oh
already.
my god, yeah, dude. Don't even.
So if you're
it's the worst.
everybody suffers from them. I don't think it's something that you can get away with. Maybe if you're Marquise, maybe then you don't have any nerves.
Marquise, I have no nerves. I am a man of steel.
But most people suffer from that kind of anxiety, and if you're feeling anxiety about more than just getting into the game and having fun, then I think it's just going to be too much for some people. Mm-hmm. So you gotta find your own way.
Yeah, and I mean everybody's
exactly.
version or everybody's entry point to character creation is going to be different. Like I've talked to numerous people about how they create characters, or I've watched other people create characters, and some people's way of creating characters is completely different from mine. Like, case in point, the two of you guys. Like, I don't do the things you do, but I love it. I love the fact that you guys have that, those styles.
Well, and what's cool to me too is it kind of it kind of points back to like what Jeremy was saying earlier about kind of following like what interests you and like the way that you are as a person. So like, for example, you come from voice acting, so it makes sense that you would spend a lot of time figuring out your character's voice before you went into a game. Where I have a lot of experience in music, specifically jazz, even more specifically like free jazz and improvisational music.
Dude, that sounds
so that's very
wonderful.
much kind of like my home base. If it's just like we're just gonna all show up with our instruments and we're just gonna play and something cool is gonna happen. And what happens, none of us know yet, but we'll figure it out. And like, so that's very kind of much carried over into my
didn't
creative
see that
style
until
as
you
a person.
actually said it, and now I 100% understand you as a human being, because I like freeform jazz and I like that, like I love that style of music, and now that I see it, I'm like, God, that is totally Jeff. Why did I not understand that
so like
before?
I bring that into kind of like that's kind of influenced my creativity as a whole. If it's just like the idea of coming in and just being like, well, I have my instrument, that's enough. I can figure the rest out. Like that's kind of the way that I build my characters. Is my character is, you know, my instrument, but it's the music that I play with.
Honestly, that's kind of the way you DM too.
Not.
Like you kind of DM by the seat of your pants, and
absolutely.
I kind of love that too.
100%. Like my DM prep notes are often about as detailed as my character backstory notes. Just like 3 bullet points and some stat blocks, and that's it.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome.
So it's very much just my style. But I'm curious. Once again, tiebreaker Jeremy over here. We have super detailed up front. We have basically completely freeform, and then Jeremy.
So to be completely honest, most of the time I don't have anything printed out or written ahead of time.
Damn it, I'm the only one? Jeez.
No, I mean, like, I used to be the kind of player that would write a 2-page backstory. And, like, I would have everything detailed and everything named up front and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I still enjoy thinking about a lot of that kind of stuff, but I don't enjoy writing it all down, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. Because I try not to do that too anymore, because I think it is kind of fun to organically find that stuff out in game with other people.
Absolutely. So, you know, I might have an idea in mind where, you know, my wife was kidnapped by orcs, and so I really dislike orcs. But within 10 minutes of playing, before I reveal that information, somebody talks about how the gnolls are really a problem in this area. Well, okay, it's no longer orcs, now it's gnolls. And now I've just embedded my character deeper into the setting and the story that's being told, and found a reason that makes sense that is going to see the light of day, as opposed to one that it will never see the light of day.
Yeah, that's like when you build a character for a one-shot, and you think you're going to see one thing, and so you build a character on the assumption of, like, oh, this one-shot's going to be something, and then you have this cool thing, or this cool feat that you could use, and it never gets used. That's one of the most annoying things to me ever, and, like, I 100% believe that.
Yeah, so I like leaving the clay wet, so to speak, you know? It may be molded already,
and I think
but
you bring up a
wet.
good point, that Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with that too. Of like something to kind of clarify about my own style is it's not that I go in with no thought into my character. I spend a lot of time thinking about my characters. I just don't settle on anything.
Sure.
So it sounds like we're kind of similar in that space. It was like, here are some ideas that I have, and what I think is kind of what I think happened to this person, but it's open to adjustment during play.
Yeah.
If I understand what you're
Absolutely.
saying
Yeah.
correctly.
And there are a lot of moments where I will just kind of not have any plan for something, and something comes up, and all of a sudden it becomes a lot larger part of the character just because it felt right in the instance to respond that way. So it felt true to the character, but more importantly, it felt true to the moment of the story.
Yes.
Oh yeah, like in your Caldera game recently, like I didn't want to give up that silver at all. And I was like, damn, you know what? I could have. Like, I could have kept on to it. And in fact, I could have probably shot the dude. But I was trying to be a good guy, and I gave it up. And then later, I was like, nope, you're a dumbass. Why'd you do that?
Yeah. But, like, the great thing about that is taking a moment like that, and instead of keeping it as an out-of-character, like, damn it, I should have done this different, is find a reason in character to explain why that decision happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You draw
100%.
something out of it. Just like when you roll a critical one, when you fail, instead of it just being a shit, I failed or whatever, find a reason to explain why your character made that flub.
Mm-hmm.
Find a chance still to insert yourself into the narrative of what's going on.
Yeah. And that goes into building characters. It's like if you can only express their successes, and you can't express their flaws, then you're not building an entirely fully formed character.
Yep, that's a great point. I hadn't even thought of putting that in this episode, but that's a fantastic point. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say, kind of going off of what you were saying, is like I totally agree, and it kind of like sums up. I guess like that's basically my strategy from the start. Is it's just like a moment happens, I act as the character, and then that kind of tells me about the character.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, maybe I decide up front, like this guy's probably going to be like a good guy, like he's going to be a good guy, and then a situation happens in game where I have the opportunity to do something good or opportunity to do something a little more shady, and I take the shady opportunity, and suddenly it's like, maybe this person isn't who I thought they were. Maybe they're not good. Maybe they actually are a little.
It's like when we played in Fiasco,
using...
because it's like you see the scenarios where, man, this guy seems like he's on the up and up, and then like halfway through the sessions, what the hell? What happened to this dude? Yeah.
But it's a organic discovery of the character.
Oh, 100%.
Which is a lot more interesting as a player, because whenever you sit down at the table, there's one more element that you don't know how it's going to go. And, it's a really cool
and to me,
thing to discover. Go ahead.
Yeah, and for me, I think, so this is not going to be the case for everybody, but for me, I think that I do better work in games when I do it that way. Like because there have been times where I have come up with very specific character traits and very specific like elements, but like every time I try to like deliver those elements, it always like either feels forced or like kind of like I'm twisting the arm of the game, to make this thing relevant or to make this part important. But if I let it kind of develop out of the events of the game, like it feels much, at least for me, like I feel like I'm able to create characters who fit better in the world and who are more like interesting and with a more defined personality, because I let their actions speak for who I'm building rather than trying to set up the standard beforehand and follow that code with actions that might not fit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense, man.
I like to have a little bit of structure kind of in mind, going in, more just about some of the things that they may have experienced that have shaped them into the way they are now.
Yeah.
He was a soldier and he's missing a finger. And that's going to be something I'm going to look for a reason to portray in the game to indicate that I'm a soldier, or that I once was. That's the kind of stuff I like to kind of have, like Chad said, kind of in my back pocket. Or, if it is a setting that has a really strong Mesoamerican, conquistador setting to kind of hit on Lloyd's Jade Horde thing.
Oh, the Jade Horde game.
Yeah.
I go and I read if it's not something I'm already somewhat familiar with, like Mesoamerican culture I'm not familiar with, so I go and I read a little bit about it. And I find things to bring to the character that I think will illustrate that connection.
Yeah.
That will draw that part of the setting out into the open.
That's beautiful, man.
No, and that is a good point that you bring up there of I do tend to do a lot of research for my games, but it's very rarely at the character level. It's more often at the cultural level, which I think is kind of a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
So I've done similar things for the Jade Horde game where I've done a lot of research into the Catholic Church and how it's structured and their practices versus how that they viewed. But none of that was to build my character. It was just to kind of feel out the world. Mm-hmm. But then I guess I still use that ultimately to build the character. It's just at a different point in the timeline.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can agree. Cool.
This is
sounds like
cool,
we're
man.
kind of...
Yeah. We said a lot about building characters there. There is something else that I did want to bring up as an interesting topic, but any last thoughts on character building? I know I kind of cut it off, so if you guys wanted to talk about character flaws for a little bit, I think that might be interesting.
I could totally
Otherwise,
do that.
we can kind of move into another topic.
Sure. For me, character flaws, I distinctly have to have one. In my characters at all times. So I'll give you an example of all three of the ones from my campaigns that I'm in. So Taxes he's completely, to a certain degree, he is antisocial because he is a constant survivor. And so he doesn't have the social graces. He doesn't have the ability to really talk or bolster people. I wanted to make sure that it was it is well known that he is more muscle than charismatic, talk your ear off kind of guy. With Rank Shank, it was the same way. I was I really want this primal character who has no understanding of social norms, and I want something where I can eviscerate an enemy, right, and then want to share the entrails with my teammate and my partner, and I want to think that is entirely okay. You know what I mean? He would see nothing wrong with being I kill this enemy. Here, you can have part of its meat, too, because that's how a lizard shares food. And then, with Sentry, when I came up with Sentry for the Dragon Grin Chronicles, I really just wanted a character that was, super naive to the world because he'd been asleep for 100 years. I wanted somebody that had been, I don't know what social norms are because I've been away from the natural world for such a long period of time. How does the natural world interact with me now that I'm here and now that I'm sentient and moving about? So I feel flaws are inherently important when you're building a character. So you should find at least one flaw, because if you don't, then everybody's Superman. And if you don't give them that kryptonite that will ultimately end them, or could possibly give them a really cool story arc, then you're just building a mannequin, right? You're just building a mannequin in a store and you're putting the clothes on him and you're saying, here he is, it looks really fancy, but he's not going to really ever accomplish anything because he's never going to be able to be defeated. There's nothing that's going to happen. He's just going to be stagnant and standing there in the world. And if you, that to me is why you give your characters flaws, is to be able to give them those successes, give them those cool things, and then ultimately say, you know what? This is where you falter in this world. This is where I can now punch you in the gut as a DM and give you a moment of hubris because not everybody is a Hercules or an Achilles or a Greek god in your setting.
Yeah, well, I mean, and kind of following it seems like the same kind of convention of this of just our styles is I agree 100%. Flaws are very important, and that like you should absolutely not make a character that doesn't have them throughout the gameplay. But similarly to what my style just in general, I don't pick a flaw. My character tells me what their flaw is when I play them. Exactly. And I have an example of this actually. I'm playing a character in Lionel's from Two Guys D&D, his Middle Earth campaign. I play a ranger, so like super like knowledgeable of the world, used to fighting with the shadow, like all that kind of stuff. So I kind of had this idea for him as this like confident leader type, which he kind of has been, but like in one of the first sessions, like 1 or 2 sessions in, super early on in the game, he asked the other party members to help him with something and that he would help them back with their quest in return. So he's like, you do something for me. After we do that, I'll help you find this thing that you're looking for. And then one of the characters that he asked to help him died in the game.
Ooh, wow.
Like literally 2 sessions in. So he's this character. He's supposed to be this like, I know how to do all the stuff. I'm confident. I know about how to fight these things. I'm like the leader. I'm the protector of the people, of the people. And then suddenly one of the people under him dies. So it's like, well, there's flaw. Massive self-doubt. Yep. Like, he's supposed to be great, and he let this person die. That's going to haunt him. And like that kind of affected the way that I played that character out for a long time in the campaign of like getting over this aspect of like, I'm supposed to be the leader, but I don't know if I'm capable.
Yeah, dude, that's beautiful.
So, like,
oh my god.
But that came in because of what happened in the game. Like, that wasn't something that I went in of like, oh, he's going to be struggling with the idea of leadership versus competence. Like, that happened in the game, and that kind of stuck as a result of like, that's going to be something good to hit on. And props to Lionel for absolutely taking that and making my life hell with it as a result. It was great.
And that's one of the great things about being a reactive kind of player. Of leaving your character malleable, so whenever something happens in the campaign and you see an opportunity to latch onto it, you can sink your teeth in really deep to this moment and make it really, really special, really, really meaningful, instead of it being this thing that kind of happened and then went under the bridge and did not become a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I completely see, like, that whole thing, though, Jeff. I do, like, because even now, like, I had a moment in our Cryfoth game the other night where one of our players almost died. First, like, 2 sessions into the campaign. And I had a moment where even though, like, I feel like even though Rankshank is more of a primal character, like, he had that moment of hubris, like, I need to help this character. I need to help this creature survive, because if I don't, Cryfoth is one of those settings where I will die if I'm alone. So it's better for me to protect the character that might die than me be alone and definitely die on my own. So I seeing that, like, and hearing you say those kinds of things, like, I'm definitely going to be more, I think now, I'm going to definitely be more of a reactive player going forward, because that seems really cool. And not only that, like, it just seems to add more dynamically to the storyline. And I kind of want to do that. So props to being able to do that.
Yeah, and like, doing both is perfectly okay. Like, I was just going to say you just have to make sure that when you're creating the stuff up front, that you leave yourself enough wiggle room, or you're okay with scratching out a paragraph because it no longer makes sense and replacing it with something else.
Yeah.
As long as you're okay with all of that going in, then I think you you are a reactive player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like one of those
Yep.
hard fast. I have to have this written down. Like, what is written, and it shall not be broken. I'm not that kind of.
Those people are out there.
You know, I'm not that kind of player.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't think that's necessarily like, unless you take it to an extreme, I don't think that's a bad,
No,
like,
not always.
you can build your characters that way and have it be very successful. Like, I think that there's kind of a nice balance point. I mean, I very much lean towards one side of, like, being more open rather than more structured up front. But, like for you, Chad, like, I don't necessarily think that you should just suddenly go out and throw out all these things that you do that works for you in favor of just trying to make it all up on the spot. Like, you can start bringing in more reactionary elements to your characters. You know, maybe leave a little bit less than you normally would.
Yeah, I mean, like,
off the table and up for debate. And I could probably benefit from taking a little bit from you, too, and saying, you know what, no, I'm going to put in a little bit more time for this character. I'm actually going to write something out. Like, I'm going to leave plenty of room so I can still do my on-the-spot thing. But, like, you don't have to pick
this isn't
side.
a pick
This isn't
one side of the coin
a
and you
war
will
between two
ultimately,
things, yeah.
you know, be better for
Like,
it.
you can take elements from both ways of doing it and kind of find your own middle ground, wherever that may end up.
I mean, not everyone is going to come at the building a character from the same perspective, and it's kind of interesting. And they shouldn't. Like, I don't think everybody should have the same perspective, because if you guys all had the same perspective, first of all, this would not be an interesting podcast. We would be cycling around the same issues over and over again, and no one will want to listen to that. But also, it's a matter of, like, I love seeing other people's play styles, man. Like, I love watching other people's games on this giant community that we have, and just seeing, like, how does that person react to this? How does that person describe their spells? How does that person, like, make their character just in a 5 minute or like a 2 minute little segment that they get between everybody's different turn, you know? Like, sometimes people only have 2 minutes to explain a spell or a moment. And sometimes that 2 minute little interval can be so impactful that, like, I'll sit here just as a viewer and be crying, or, you know, or be, like, on the edge of my seat because I really want them to, like, wail on the bad guy. But it's because of the fact that they've put so much vested interest into making that character believable in that small period of time.
Yeah, you make them care for them.
Yeah.
You make them invested in what's going on in their success, their emotional well-being, whatever.
Yeah, like, you don't have to do, like, I don't know. I'm a weirdo because I come to the table and do, like, all of these voices because I ultimately feel like that's the only, like, that's the way that I get people to connect with those characters. Mm-hmm. But there are some days where I'm like, man, you know what I'd really like to do? I'd like to go and play a game with just my normal voice, and then just see if I could, like, deliver a character on that same level that I do with the other characters that I come up with.
Yeah. Now, something that I will say that I'm a huge advocate for, and people have disagreed with me on this, so of course, as always, you know, whatever, all that stuff. I'm hugely an advocate for, you know, it's okay to have your style and to have things that you like and the way that you usually do things, but I think it's incredibly important to always experiment. Like, keep a laboratory play style, ultimately, is what, like, the way that I like to call
laboratory
it.
play
so
style,
like,
sounds badass and wonderful, and I'm going to keep that.
So it's like, so for example, I usually keep my characters very freeform, but every once in a while, every, like, 3 months or so, I think it's important to just, like, do something completely different from what you normally do, just to see what it feels like. And even if you don't like it, there are still probably pieces of it that you can take and make useful. Mm-hmm.
Well, and, I mean, for that matter, so, like, take it one step further. Like, if you're going to be playing a character who's incredibly studious and who's constantly got his nose in a book, then write a whole shit ton of material for your character. You know, if you're going to be playing a character who's scatterbrained and chaotic, then keep your notes that way. What better way to put yourself into the mind of your character than to do it? Like, to make yourself feel like your character sometimes.
That can get really dangerous real quick.
Yeah.
Jeremy, like,
Sure.
no joke. Sometimes it's like, if I sit around and I do a monologue for a character for too long, like, I get so emotionally invested in that character. And, like, I could be doing it at home, not, like, online during the games. I can be, like, practicing things in my head or practicing moments in my head. And it can get kind of, like... It can get kind of sketch because you can get like really emotionally invested in those characters, and then you're like, oh shit, whoa, what did I do? Like, I gotta tone it down. Kind of like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the documentary that's recently out on Netflix for like Andy and Jim, the Andy and Jim one, where
Yeah, I saw it.
Jim Carrey played Andy Kaufman. There are times where I'm a method actor. I love like trying to invest myself in that character. So I do a lot of monologuing on my own free time. And sometimes it can get rough because you're like, whoo, I really hope that doesn't come up for a while because that was emotionally taxing on me. You know, like...
Yeah, but again,
So
like when you have a moment like that in game, that's gold, man.
yeah,
That's, to me,
yeah.
that's
And
gold.
I'll be honest. Yeah, no, 100%. And you know, maybe this says something weird about me. And I'm totally willing to accept that in this regard. I'm maybe a little crazy.
No, you're not at all.
That feeling
None of
of
us are
being
strange.
like in too deep and like overwhelmed and like that like anxiety of too much. I love that feeling. Like it's like that's enjoyable to me to have that experience of like, whoa, this is a little much.
Now, like, I'm not talking about, like, you know, if your character is, you know, has a lot of tattoos, that you go out and get a lot of tattoos. I'm not trying to go that
You
far.
heard it here first, folks. Jeremy's advocating tattoos if you want to play a tattooed badass.
So this is actually secretly a perfect segue to my second topic that I wanted
Cool.
to talk
See,
about.
I
and that
segue
was
even when I don't know I'm doing
things
it.
that you. Yeah, well, you and Chad were secretly genius on that one because literally my second topic was things that you can do after you've built your character, between sessions or before sessions or during them, to develop them further, like exercises that you can do or activities that you can do to help kind of grab a hold of that
Vocal
character.
training, 100%.
So you've kind of exactly illustrated. So something that it sounds like you do, Chad, is do monologues in character.
Monologues in character, but it's not only that. It's like, so say somebody comes to me and says, and I've had people ask me this, like, hey, I'm going to be playing in a game and I need a Scottish accent, or I need an Irish accent, or man, I would really love to learn how to do a New York accent. And there's a lot of times where I'll sit down and I'll try to like give them examples and send them stuff via Facebook or, you know, whatever. Because I think it's important to have that kind of knowledge base. But if I don't know it, I don't want to give someone else that knowledge without me having that knowledge. So I'll go out and I'll listen to actual sounds and stuff. Like when I did the Mafia game that I just ran for Fiasco, I listened to so much New York accents, but like so many New York accents by just going through and watching movies and like going on YouTube and actually listening to how like New York accents between the different boroughs sounded. So the difference between Queens and the Bronx and all that stuff, it gets really, really dicey and really different depending on which borough you're from. I didn't know a whole lot about that, and so it helped me to build those characters in that game by doing that extra research. So I don't know. That's just my take on that. Like the little tiny minutia that I put into that go an extra mile after the first session is like, maybe I do that first session and I'm not super happy with how that first session came out or that first voice came out. Well, then I'm definitely going to go back and be like, nuh-uh, session 2, I'm going to hit it hard. I'm going to just wreck it and make it 100% better. I don't plan on kind of half-assing that. But that's just me. I put a lot of pressure on myself to define that character and make it 100% accurate. And if I don't, then I feel like I'm letting down my players, or I feel like I'm letting myself down at the end of the day, because, man, I'm not reaching that potential that I want to hit. But I don't know. That's just me and my weird quirks. So
Yeah.
No, man.
Yeah. So let's just kind of illustrate. Well, go ahead, Jeremy. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, no, like I don't think it's that bizarre, or that's that far off base.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to kind of like give an example of some things that I do to kind of help illustrate what I'm talking about. So I have two things that I do for all of my characters as often as I can bear to do it. Well, the first one I do for every character, no matter what, and that's I have a song that I associate with that character.
that's super cool.
Based off of like emotions and like themes of that song that like relate to what that character is going through.
I have never done that.
So
but
basically, what I can so basically, what I do is like right before, as close to the session as I can do it. So like either right before I join the hangout, or if there's a moment before, like after the hangout started, but before we start, like I'll just literally like close my eyes, turn everything off, and listen to that song with like my full attention with the character in mind. And for me, that's like it's such a help to being immersed in the character once the session starts. Like that kind of like getting into it. Like I don't have that problem.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of that help is
that's
of that.
cool, man. I'm gonna have to do that now.
So like I'll give a couple examples. So my character in the Middle Earth game that I was talking about before, Arafor, the ranger, especially after that moment happened that I was talking about, his song was "Who Am I" from the musical Les Miserables.
Wow.
Just
nice.
like this like song about like self-doubt and self-reflection.
Oh, that's
and like it's a really like emotionally powerful song. And kind of like thinking about like what the character has gone through and how that kind of identity crisis moment affects him, and like it ties in lyrically to the song. Like immediately I'm like, I'm in that character. Like if I listen to that song and think about it, I am that person, like for that moment.
It is one of Jean Valjean's, isn't it? No, it's
Yes.
Oh, is it Jean Valjean?
Yep,
Okay.
it is. Yep.
That's. I'm not a huge musical person. I did musical theater, and like I enjoy musicals, okay, but Les Mis is just.
Oh, it's my favorite musical
Yeah.
by far. I've listened to it literally dozens of times. The whole thing.
It's just and even the non-musical versions of it are fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to gravitate towards like. I think theater songs are good because they tend to be very personality focused,
Sure.
which is why I tend to gravitate towards them for my characters. It's like the songs have a purpose and an expression to them, and it's like, yeah, if you want to just use like maybe a rock song really ties you into it, like that's totally fine. It's just not generally where I tend to go right off the bat.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, like you said, musical theaters usually they're continuing the story of what's developing on the stage, just simply doing it through song and sometimes dance, instead of just dialogue. So there's usually still a story that's there, something that you can kind of latch onto these beats, instead of a song that is poetic but doesn't really tell a story.
Yeah, and I find just like the music part of it, like just I'm very much like an emotional music listener. Like it like music has a very, very profoundly strong impact on my mood and my personality. Like while I listen to it, so that might be why this specific exercise is so strong for me.
Now you're talking about my jam. That's me. Like,
yeah. So it's. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Finish. Whatever.
I was just going to say, so like taking those emotions and like the way that the song like affects me, like by tying that into a character trait, like it's like I said, it's instant immersion, at least for me. Like when I do that,
Yeah.
so like it can be a very powerful tool of like a jump start to get you in character. If music is your kind of thing and it affects you, like I would absolutely recommend finding a song that represents your character and like listening to that when you want to work on that character, or even just to get into character.
So that's a great call. like I said, I listen to music a lot. Music is definitely something that I consume a lot of, especially whenever I'm prepping or writing or stuff like that for my campaigns and stuff, especially. And I'll do it as a player as well. But usually I develop a playlist. And for the most part, for me, the music is a little different. Like, I actually seek soundtracks out because I like music without lyrics, because I find the lyrics distracting, because instead of being able to create my own story, it's feeding me a story, and that may or may not be the direction that I have in mind for the character, the concept that I'm working on. So instead, I feed purely off of the emotional reaction to the music and form my own story based on how I feel about the music, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So,
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't tend to have the same reaction to like lyrics that you do.
Right.
Like, I don't find them like, unless they're completely way off base. Like,
right.
But if they're even remotely close, like, it can be useful for me. But I totally understand just like that, the primal part of the song itself that you can kind of use as a projection board.
Well, especially
rather than like as the entirety.
And especially for me, especially soundtracks that are from movies, video games, television shows, because the music is specifically written in order to support a kind of emotional scene. It's meant to be an underlying like support that kind of carries a particular message or story while something else is going on. And so for gaming, that's perfect for me, because while something else is going on, while we're discussing what's going on in the game, or sometimes even rolling dice, there is this emotional support that flows underneath the scene for me.
Yeah.
So and it's the same whether I'm writing up a character or drawing up a dungeon or, whatever it may be. Like, that's, and specifically I will aim for things that are either similar to in tone or culture or genre for what I'm particularly working on. So again, for Lloyd's Jade Horde Empire, I made a playlist, and the first thing that I went and downloaded was Apocalypto, the soundtrack from the Mel Gibson movie.
Yes, 100%. Like, that's perfect. That's perfect.
And then I go and I download the non-lyrical songs from the Puss in Boots soundtrack and the Zorro soundtrack, so it gets a lot of that Spanish, flamenco guitar and stuff thrown in, and all of that kind of melding together is what kind of identifies the story or the character for me.
Very cool, dude.
Yeah, I use a lot of soundtrack stuff too, like especially like if it's a very cultural setting. Like, if it's a very, like, specific, like, if I'm playing in Iscloft, like, putting on, like, Wardruna or, like, super, like, war drum chanting kind of music. Versus, like, if I'm playing in, like your Ashes of Heaven, like, I'll put on a lot of, like, traditional Asian music, or at least inspired by that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a powerful way to, like, feel the setting out, like, not just auditorially, because, like, music, at least for me, is so much more than that. Like, just viscerally. Like, it puts you in that kind of place.
Well, and a lot of times for me, it'll actually inform the way I react to a situation. If the song is really intense and angry, then I'll probably have a more aggressive response to whatever goes on. So it's less of a choice that I have to make, and one that I'm feeling angry in character, so my response is more genuine, but it's still anger. So yeah, and even stuff like the different instruments that are used in different cultural music helps kind of establish, little connections and tendrils and stuff in my brain while I'm playing.
Yeah, 100%. So I have another exercise that I use too, but I don't want to just like run all off mine. So is there any other things that you guys like do either like between sessions or like right before a session to kind of feel a character out a little bit further before I kind of give my next one?
Yeah, man. So another thing that I like to do is Pinterest is my best friend. Pinterest and I have a very intimate relationship with each other. So when Hangouts was a thing, and not to say that it's not, but like when you were able to build overlays on a regular basis, I prided myself on, like, as soon as I had that character in my head, I was immediately building that overlay. Because as soon as I could get character art image in my head matching the voice and, like, a name is a big thing. I never thought, until I started playing D&D on a regular basis, name conventions are hard. Right? They're really, like, it's hard to come up with a name for your character that doesn't feel corny and reused and rehashed or whatever, because you want your character to feel unique. But that's one of the first things I do is go to Pinterest, find my stuff, and I usually have, like, different categories of stuff laid out. So for, like, Harbinger, I have a whole Call of Cthulhu, like, space anything, all of the space eldritch stuff goes all in one, and then I have like one for all of my own individual settings, and then I have ones for settings that I love. So I have like one for Kryphoth, and like, or things that I've played in. So like Caldera, I have one for Caldera, I have one for Kryphoth, I have one, that I'm playing for Lore Keepers, just stuff that I have for, like, little memories and little pocket memories. So even if it's not for my character, it's like, hey, I want to visually look at that thing, and that thing is going to inspire me in this moment to do this thing. I think that's really, really an impactful thing that you should have for your character, because that can really elevate your character later on. That's at least one of the methods that I do going into a game, is immediately have that overlay set up, or if it's not an overlay, just having that picture there for you to have, even sitting next to you at the table. If you can't have overlays, like, it's nice to know what your character looks like, so you can actually describe that in game if they can't see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as, like, anything that I might add, I don't know that I really have anything else. I think I've pretty much touched all the points that I can at least think to put into words. Just be reactive.
I do have one more thing that I do. So kind of a fun caveat to basically everything that I said during the first half of this. I have basically 0 notes going into a character, but between sessions, once I've played the character, I do a ton of character journaling.
Oh, that's cool.
So basically, like, between one session and the next, I'll write out kind of like a couple paragraphs about, like, an event that happened in the session and, like, kind of my character's reflections on that.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that happened. What does my character think about that? How do they feel? How is this kind of affecting them? What are their kind of lingering thoughts that I don't have, like, the time or place to express in game? It'd be weird to kind of just keep bringing up all this stuff that was happening and, like, oh, well, now my character's thinking about all these super detailed personal things about it. Like, it doesn't really have necessarily a lot of time to do that during the game, but I find it incredibly useful to kind of feel out that information between sessions. So just to kind of use an example,
I started doing something very similar to that recently, Jeff, with a sketchbook. I got a sketchbook, and I started doing that for games. I'll write the title of the game on top, and then I'll start sketching out stuff, like, either during, like, if not usually during, but like right after the game, I'll go back and I'll start sketching stuff. And I think that's very, like, it's a very similar aspect, but it's also something, like, even if it's a one shot, like, it's a way you can keep memories and hold on to, like, really cool moments that you may have shared with friends playing in these games.
Yeah, like, I find it really helps me to do, like, what we were talking about with flaws before, like, with me and Jeremy. Like, when you have those moments in game that can be, like, defining moments, like, it's easy, like, especially if the next session of the game isn't going to happen for, 2 weeks or a month even, maybe. Like, you don't want to lose that feeling that moment had and the impact that it has on your character. So if you can kind of take a moment to reflect, like in the character's mind about that event, like for me, it helps solidify a lot of those, like, so I'm very freeform until something happens, and then I make a choice, and then I want that choice to stick, and I want it to matter. So I kind of use journaling as a way to push that and kind of develop it. Just to kind of give a specific example, just because I think that those can be helpful. In my, I'm playing in Rob's Performance Checks Vampire the Masquerade game, which is
absolutely beautiful
awesome.
game.
It's one of my favorite campaigns.
I've been watching that game like nobody's business, and it's beautiful.
But my character, Siegfried, in that game, was having a lot of trouble coming to terms with the fact that he's a vampire now. Like, all the other people seem to just kind of get it. They're like, oh, this is our new life. Like, it's weird, and there's a lot about my old life that it's going to be painful to forget and leave behind. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do to keep on. But he was having a lot of issues with that. Like, abandoning his old life was not easy for him. But then he had a conversation with one of the other characters in one of the sessions where he basically, like, the other character told him, like, look, this is your life now. You either have to find a way to deal with it, or why don't you just go walk out in the sunlight and kill yourself? Because, like, if it's too much, like, those are the only options. You figure something out to move on, or just be done with it. So, which was, like, a hugely important moment, I think, for that character in that campaign. So, like, I spent a lot of time, like, trying to think about, like, okay, well, how does somebody who's so wrapped up in their old life that's now gone, but understands the importance to move on, like, cope with that? Like, what would they try to, like, what would they do to try to rationalize their new things? And I kind of came up with this idea of, so Siegfried is in that game, because it's a modern game, like, literally, like, 2018 modern. He is an actor and a singer. Like, he does musical theater and opera and acting and things like that. So, like, I came up with this idea that, like, Siegfried, the person in the game, is going to, like, basically create, like, a character to play as a vampire as, like, a coping mechanism.
Nice.
But, like,
Perfect.
so it's like, instead of, like, me doing all these things, I'm just playing a person. I'm just playing a character who's doing these things. And, like, normally I would do that on a stage, but I'm just going to do that in real life kind of thing. But, like, having a huge monologue about that in the game would be, like, the amount of time that it would take to properly express all that in the way that you would want it to be done. Like, it's just not really.
Yeah, it would
reasonable.
probably
Like,
it would
so
probably
much
come out
time.
like just it would look atrocious, and it would take like 15 minutes for you to explain that in one.
I don't.
Yes.
I can't agree. I think that there are actually good ways that you can showcase that. Pepper it in.
I can't. Showcase, yes, 100%. But to explain that entire thought process, I mean.
Oh, no, to piece it all together for the audience, no. But I don't think it's interesting when that happens anyways. I think it's much more interesting,
but I think
it's discovered slowly.
I agree, but, like, the thought process for the character, I thought was, like, it was really important to me to figure out what I was going to do with that character going forward.
Yes,
so what I did is I wrote it all out. Like, I wrote up basically, like, a character journal of him, like, going back and forth, like, everyone else is adjusting so easily. Why am I not? Why am I having so much trouble? Like, oh, suddenly epiphany. You know, I've played evil characters before that have done bad things. How is, you know, playing a vampire any different? Like, and just, like, basically wrote that all out to kind of give myself. And I shared it with the other players just because we like to do that in that group with each other. But you don't even have to do that. Like, you can just write it out only for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And then now, as I'm playing that character in the game, now I can start dropping little hints that maybe this transformation is occurring.
Exactly.
That he's figuring out these ways to put this barrier up between himself and the world as a character rather than as a person. And you can start kind of hinting at that and bringing it up in game and having it be important in game. But, like, the whole deep monologue thought process part of it, you know, kind of happens behind the scenes. But I think doing those exercises, at least for me, is, like, profoundly helpful for my characters.
Oh yeah, man, that sounds super cool.
So I do, like, almost no writing up front, but I do a ton of writing after the fact.
That's awesome.
Yep, I'm gonna, like, steal like half of the things that you guys have talked about tonight, and, like, just try them, see if I like them. You know, try on that pair of shoes, and if they don't fit, you know what? no worries.
That's the beauty about talking about role-playing games like this, or listening to people in their podcasts or any of this kind of stuff. Like, that's how you grow as a player, is you discover things that you want to try, and you try them, and you either like them or you don't. The ones that you like, you keep, and you keep doing that repeatedly over and over and over again.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And that's how you find your style.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
That is exactly it. And I can confess some. I mean, obviously, I hope and I think that this information is useful for the people that will listen to this. But part of this was, I can admit, purely selfish. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Building characters and exercises that you can do to further them. So I fully intended coming into this literally just to steal your guys' ideas. So Chad, if something inspired you, then absolutely take it, because that's exactly why I wanted to do this topic in the first place, so that I could do the same thing to you. And that anybody who listens can do the same thing to all of us.
Yes.
Because, that's really progress. It's very rare that you can come up with a revolutionary breakthrough on your own. It's so difficult. It's to come up with a new idea. But by being exposed to other people's ideas,
and
suddenly that
remaining
can flip
open-minded.
switches in you that you didn't know were there.
Yeah, and especially if you remain open-minded. Instead of being discountful or dismissive about something that you hear about, and you're like, that's not for me. Try it. It's not going to hurt anything to give it a shot. And if you find out you really don't like it, then it's not hard to just not ever do it again.
Yeah, well, I think that can be it can be just as important to find out what you specifically don't like as it is to find out things that you do.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Because then you can say, I don't want to do that anymore, and then you can stay away from it.
Yep.
It's like trying a new food. Like if a friend of mine takes me to a new restaurant and says, "Oh man, you got to try this new thing," and I'm like, but that's not really my jam. They're like, "You got to try this," and then I go. If I don't like it, I'm not gonna openly say I don't like it, but I'm not gonna go back to that restaurant again. You know what I mean?
I'll openly say I don't like it, but I'm so take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, no, it's all learning. Whether you like it or you don't, whether it's useful or it's not, you've come away with more information, and you've come away with a better focus of how you want to be, whether that's acting in a role-playing game or broader in other life stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the very least, you have made an informed decision instead of a guess.
Exactly.
You have at least known that, I experienced that, and it's not for me. That's a life lesson, I think. That's not just an RPG lesson.
Yeah. That's a
That's
a big character lesson too. The whole thing for tonight was about us talking about character development and character building. Mm-hmm. If you see somebody build a character and you see how their process is, and you're like, damn, that character is super cool. How did you come up with that character? I want you to go and message that person and be like, hey, saw your character tonight. That was flippin' awesome. How did you do that? And how did you come up with that thing? And you played this wonderful song. What did you do to do that thing? Because gaining other people's knowledge is what we do for this hobby. If you're not actively pursuing that, then you're not and I'll go back to it because I think we mentioned this in the last podcast. You're not building up your toolkit. You're not building that toolkit if you're not actively pursuing it like it's a classroom and raising your hand when you don't understand things and asking people, hey, I really want to learn how to do that thing, or I really want to learn how to do this thing. If you're not actively pursuing that, how are you going to change your style and the way that you're doing things if you don't pursue it further?
Input. That might be too old of a reference for you guys.
No, I got that. That was beautiful.
That went right over my head. So.
Thanks, brother.
Short Circuit.
Thanks, brother. Channel 5 alive. Yeah. Thanks, man. I love you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's input. If you're not putting information if you're not putting information into your brain, then you're going to stagnate.
Yep. We
And
just
when you
introduced
stagnate.
Jeff to a new
you
thing.
become stupid.
I love it.
No, like it's this game is about a group of people coming together and being cooperative on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to understand that that's something you need to bring to the table. And, with your character, you have to come and offer this character up to be shaped and to be changed by what happens in the game, by other people's input. And if you're not doing that, then more than likely it's going to be causing a little bit of a problem in the game at some point. Because you're refusing to adapt and change.
Yeah.
100%. No, it's just like, it's a very important, even just life thing for me. It's like everything that's out there is an opportunity. Like there's something about it that you can take that can make you better at what you want to be better at, or even make you better at the things that you didn't know you wanted to be better at until you found out about them. So it's like,
exactly.
I think, like, as much as we've talked about, like, play style and things like that, like, it's so important for your play style to remain, and your play style and your methods to remain open. You can have preferences, but there's something you can learn from every person that you interact with in this hobby, or any creative hobby, or really anything. Like, that there's something that they might understand that you might not get, or there's a person that they can tell you about that might change the way that you play if you're only ready to listen. Like, and by being open and aware to new influences and integrating them rather than being like, oh, well, that's not my style, so I'm going to ignore that. To instead say, well, maybe there's something there for me, and take that and make it a part of you, at least just a little bit. You don't have to take the whole thing, but take something. And if you do that over a long period of time, that all combines into basically a unique mixture that only you can make.
Yep.
So you may be stealing from other people. You may be taking this idea from him, that building that character concept, the way that Chad builds characters, the way that Rob narrates his games, the way that Jeremy uses art. But if you take that all and you blend it together through your own ideas, it becomes your own style. So, like, yes. I've said it a million times before, and I'll say it a million times again. Steal everything.
Nothing is copyright.
Like,
everything is acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, don't blatantly steal word for word things and infringe.
Plagiarism
on
is
like,
fun.
As far like methods, and inspirations and like styles, things. Steal all that.
Yeah.
Yep. And hubcaps.
Hubcaps.
Definitely steal hubcaps.
Yeah, and also, yes, and stereos. Those are very valuable.
Stereos.
Especially ones that have cassette players.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Did we
Especially
just become
cassettes.
accessories to felons? Like, I feel like we
Maybe.
did.
I think probably.
I'll just put a little disclaimer at the start of this show that we don't
Don't
endorse
steal stereos.
thievery openly. We only endorse it secretly, so
yes.
please don't do it.
And only in the RPG sense. Like,
But-
if you're
but
doing it in real
seriously.
life, that's
But
a
seriously.
no-no. In
Fantasy
RPG
versus
fantasy,
It's a nice way to make a quick buck.
there you go.
No, in real life, stealing is great. I'm willing to go on the record and say that.
Wow.
Thanks, Jeff. This is stuff I didn't know about you, but now that I do, wow, that
Jeff
changes
stands
our
alone.
friendship
The Jeff
perspective.
stands
All right,
alone.
so
Okay.
that last one was maybe.
So,
No, it wasn't.
actually steal.
He's lying. It's not a joke. That's
so
real life.
I think as
But-
delirium begins to overtake us, and we're running at the 2-hour mark, I think that maybe, just maybe, it's time to wrap this puppy up.
Put a little bow on it.
I think you might be right. We're starting to advocate for criminal activity, so we should probably cut it
Openly,
off before
no
we
less.
go too crazy.
Well, I mean, if we're just a bunch of bandits in a rogue faction that happen to really like thievery, like we're not not
talked
playing
about
our characters.
method acting already, Chad.
Yeah, I know.
We talked about method acting
Yeah.
in going too far, man. No.
Okay, well, I guess I
Yeah.
got to take back all the stuff that I did this
Yeah, that would
afternoon.
probably be a good idea.
That's a good idea.
Return that stereo. to
Okay.
those
Yeah,
caps.
you should really.
All right.
Yeah, you should really do that probably soon.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, I don't remember whose turn it is to do
Not mine.
a sign off, so I'll do it. Yeah, this has been the Dudes of Yore, Jeremy, Lilley, Chad, Knick, and myself, Jeff Doty. And for my snazzy improv sign off, steel car stereos. There you go.
With any luck, something about what you've just listened to is both informative and entertaining. Be sure, if you're interested, to get in touch with us. You can find Jeremy Lilley on his YouTube channel, The Erasmus Expeditions. Jeff Doty can be found on his YouTube channel, Encounterbalance. And Chad Knick can be found on his YouTube channel, currently under his name. I guess that about wraps it. Huh? Oh, right. This is but one of many grand tales, traveler. The coin in the hat is much appreciated. We will return with further stories and advice for your listening pleasure. So be sure to return when you pass through here again, and the road has worn you down. The next round is on us.
Steel car stereos. Oh, good lord. No.
We just said no to that.
Nope, that's the end. Nope, I'm cutting it off right there.
Steel
That's
car
the end of the
stereos.
That's going to be our slogan. Dudes of Yore, steel car stereos.
Oh my god.
Yep.
I'm dying.
No
over here.
context.
No context. Just steel car stereos. And then we're going to get a bunch of car stereos mailed to us as fan mail. Like, here guys, we heard you guys love car stereos.
Well, actually, Chad, yours is the only personal address that we actually put on the Dudes of Yore stuff.
Ah, shit.
Yeah. So I would, the cops might be.
So if I get a bunch of
obviously,
Amazon boxes filled with nothing but hubcaps and stereos,
Used car stereos.
they're all hot. Don't
Make sure
touch them.
Just make sure I get my 33%, if you would.
Oh damn, 33%, homie. Okay.
Yeah. Don't you dare snitch on us to the cops, but I want my shit.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm so glad you're my
That's
friend.
the way this works.
Like, Jesus Christ, I'm so glad. This is so good.
Oh, man.
We're idiots, and I love it. I don't care.
No, I'm serious. That was my sign.
That's
I
okay.
think it's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
That's
You know
it.
what?
It'll stand.
It'll stand. I'll take it to the grave now.
I'm hitting stop right now on Audacity.
Awesome.
Yep. 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 Yep.